Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Thank you to all of our members, subscribers, viewers from all across the world for tuning in for another live stream. If you're new to my channel, I have these live streams regularly to share the platform with, of course, everyone, and have more in-depth talk and analysis when it comes to the topics that we talk about. I haven't had a video yet today. I also have a video tab for those of you who prefer shorter videos. I will have one after this video with an important update with what's happening in Israel in Iranian infiltration, and what Israel is doing when it comes to the army. The situation is really bad in Israel, and they have taken extreme measures, further extreme measures. All of these things, including what I'm about to share with you from Anthony Blinken, signal that we're going to something very big. What I want to talk to you about is two things in this live stream, and then of course I'll open the space for all of the community to participate. Firstly, Anthony Blinken and his declaration, right? Netanyahu accepted a ceasefire. Oh. And now they're waiting for Hamas. What do you mean waiting for Hamas? Hamas wasn't there in the negotiations. What the hell is wrong with you? Anyway, I wanted to share a video with you, and then we will comment on it.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is now my 9th trip to the region since October 7th. And President Biden asked me to come back on this trip with two main goals in mind. The first is to reaffirm the commitment of the United States to Israel's security. And that's a commitment that we put into practice virtually every day since October 7th, including when Israel was attacked directly by Iran back in April. In recent weeks, given the heightened tensions, we have deployed additional assets to the region. The purpose of the deployment of these assets is not to provoke aggression, but rather to deter it, to make sure that it doesn't happen. But also to make clear that if it does, we are fully prepared to defend Israel. We've coupled this effort with an intense diplomatic campaign, virtually a global diplomatic campaign, working with countries around the world to send the message strongly to every concerned party not to take any steps that would escalate tensions, that would risk provoking a wider conflict. And this too has been something we've been working on from day one since October 7th. It's been one of our primary objectives to prevent the conflict from escalating, from spreading in other places. And so this coupling of our military commitments, our security commitments, with an intense diplomatic campaign is something that I'm pursuing on this trip, again, with the intent of making sure that we deter further conflict, but that we're also clearly prepared to defend against it if it comes. But what's most crucial now is that everyone refrain from taking any actions that could fuel further conflict, escalate tensions, and result in the spreading of violence and conflict. Second purpose was to further the intense efforts we're engaged in across our government to bring an agreement for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages across the finish line. That is the single best way, obviously, to get hostages home, to get an enduring ceasefire that also reflects Israel's security interests, to relieve the terrible daily suffering of Gazans, men, women, and children, desperate for food to eat, for shelter, and for staying out of harm's way. Back in May, President Biden put before the world a detailed proposed agreement on a ceasefire and the release of hostages. And the entire world rallied behind it. Country after country came out in support of that agreement. The United Nations Security Council voted 14-0 in support of the agreement. And the heart of it is incorporated into a UN Security Council resolution. Just last week, the president put forward a proposal with Qatar and with Egypt to try to bridge the gaps that remain between the parties so that we could get agreement to what the president put out there a couple of months ago. In a very constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he confirmed to me that Israel accepts the bridging proposal, that he supports it. It's now incumbent on Hamas to do the same. And then the parties, with the help of the mediators, the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, have to come together and complete the process of reaching clear understandings about how they'll implement the commitments that they've made under this agreement. But the next important step is for Hamas to say yes, and then in the coming days, for all of the expert negotiators to get together to work on clear understandings on implementing the agreement. These are still complex issues, and they're going to require hard decisions by the leaders. Ultimately, it comes down to those decisions, but there is, I think, a real sense of urgency here across the region on the need to get this over the finish line and to do it as soon as possible. The United States is deeply committed to getting this job done, to getting it done now. From here, I'm going on to Egypt and Qatar. And these are our two critical partners in this effort to get the ceasefire agreement over the finish line, to get the hostages home, to put everyone on a better path to lasting peace and security. And so I look forward to consulting with President Sisi, with the Emir, Sheikh Tamim, with other critical colleagues in both countries on the immediate steps ahead, and in particular, what needs to be done to ensure that Hamas comes along, agrees to the bridging proposal, and that everyone then works on finalizing a clear understanding of their commitments to implement the agreement. That's where we are. And again, I just say that for us, for President Biden, there's a deep sense of urgency in getting this done. And I also hear that throughout this country, as well as throughout the region. It's the single best way, not only to get the hostages home, to ease the suffering of people in Gaza, it's also the best way to make sure that conflict doesn't spread, that we don't see escalation, that we can actually diffuse some of the pressure points that we see throughout the region, and then open prospects for trying to build a more enduring peace and security for everyone throughout the Middle East. Happy to take some questions.
Okay, enough torture. I'm sure you've been tortured enough by his speech. But the first thing is, I mean, I can't help but feel like there's like this demonic possession behind that. The man is so insincere. It's unbelievable. I mean, the lies, the level of lies, geez. Firstly, Hamas are not in the negotiations. Why are they not in the negotiations? Because they already accepted a ceasefire, not once, but the second time they accepted the initial proposal, saying that we just need to make sure certain things, certain details are met. That showed cleverness from Hamas's side. Why? Because those details included Netzarim and the Philadelphia corridor. What was the United States preparing at the time? Hamas, of course, viewed it positively from the perspective of the ceasefire itself. Good, UN Security Council going ahead, okay. But that did not include the Philadelphia corridor and the Netzarim line. Why? Because the drafts that they were talking about were there before Israel occupied Netzarim, before their permanent presence in Netzarim, and before they occupied the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing. Meaning Hamas were aware that we're gonna fall into a trap here. What's that trap? We accepted a ceasefire, okay? We accepted a ceasefire. Firstly, no commitment to completely halt all of the Israeli hostile actions when it comes to Gaza. That's why they wanted elaboration and clarification from the United States to say that, okay, Israel has to stop the war completely, although Biden said that in his speech, but they don't trust them. And do we blame them for not trusting them? Of course not. They constantly breach their agreements with them. Then they told them Israel did not occupy Philadelphia corridor and Netzarim before this was drafted. Therefore, we demand that this is included in the agreement. America, the United States administration, they of course are trying to cover up for Israel. They're part of the problem. They're not part of the solution. They constantly buy Benjamin Netanyahu more and more time. How many visits did this man have to Israel? 9 times. Recently, the waves of foreign ministers visiting Israel. What is all of that for? To supposedly apply pressure on the Israeli government. How do you apply pressure on the Israeli government? By going there and talking to them? No, by taking concrete measures, actions. What are those actions? Embargo. Stop arming them, right? Stop giving them diplomatic and political immunity, okay? How can you have certain leverage on Israel when you just send them a further 20 billion, more fighter jets, more heavy bombs that they killed, destroyed people in Gaza, landed it on populated areas deliberately, okay? But now he's saying that, oh no, we were bridging the gap and we're just waiting for Hamas. Dude, Hamas are not in the negotiations, that's first and foremost. They told you come with the previous proposal that we accepted, that we agreed upon, and give us the assurances that Israel is going to implement it. Clearly, the United States is not able to do that, no matter what they've done so far. And clearly what they've done so far is just to show clearly Benjamin Netanyahu is the head of the United States, is the head of the American army even, by sending all of these aircraft carriers and the F-22 Raptors through Britain, of course, to the Middle East. What? To defend this criminal genocidal entity. Clearly, we're going nowhere, and they're trying to buy time. And that is what Hamas is saying. Hamas rejects what they are offering now. Clearly, they're not there yet, but we had further elaboration from one of their senior figures called Sami Abu Zuhri earlier on, and another senior figure called Mahmoud al-Mirdawi, alongside other figures too, saying that America is basically covering up for Israel. There is nothing concrete here, and they are giving Israel everything that they need to continue the genocide, and they're buying Benjamin Netanyahu time, which is what he wants to buy. Benjamin Netanyahu wants to buy time to protect himself, and he is still there. And who's protecting him? First and foremost, the United States administration. That is the first part. Second part, we have had more intensity from Lebanon. Hizbullah today, they sent 5 drones up to Acre. They targeted multiple bases. Israel is targeting deeper into Lebanon. They targeted Baalbek and 80 kilometers inside Lebanese territory. Things are expanding. They're not de-escalating. And I will be posting another video after this live stream to elaborate further on the military actions that Israel is taking. That signal that we're going towards something bigger. Now, all of what Hezbollah is doing on a day-to-day basis is not the response for the assassination of the top military figure, Fuad Shukr, that Israel assassinated in Beirut a few weeks ago. It's only responses to what Israel is conducting on a day-to-day basis in Lebanon. Has the moment now come for Hezbollah to say it didn't work? Anthony Blinken and the Biden administration, they are clearly proving that they are only giving a cover for Israel to continue its genocide, and now is the time to conduct the retaliation attack. We have very many reasons to believe that, especially what Israel is doing with regards to having more forces. Again, that's something that I will be talking about in the video after this live stream, because they failed with the Orthodox community and they're taking severe measures to ramp up their military numbers to prepare for something that is coming. Is that going to be restricted only to Hezbollah? Maybe. Why? Because Hezbollah already said that with regards to the retaliation, that's something that could happen from our end only, or in joint collaboration with the other resistance fronts and Iran. Yemen, like we said previously, they declared that it will be an all-out response. However, Hezbollah are probably playing with the nerves of the Israeli leadership by saying that it could come from us, but it could also come in a coordinated attack. and we will, of course, do it. It's coming. When, how, they didn't provide any more details. Iran are saying it's coming when the time is suitable for us. Clearly, they're facing a lot of pressure from international countries, primarily countries aligned with Israel, to delay the attack, cancel the attack on Israel, not retaliate. But they're still saying that they will respond in the time that is suitable for them. This is what I wanted to share with you in this live stream, and I'll open the space up for the community for any questions or comments. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Again, if you have anything for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting it. And okay, Muna, yeah, that's very interesting. Mahmoud, please talk about the attempted invasion of Lebanon, which ended up with the IOF leaving their wounded, dead, and dirty diapers behind. That's very relevant. Thank you for pointing that out. Israel had another attempted invasion to Lebanon that was taken down again by Hizbullah. And if for those of you who are unaware, the Israeli army had two invasion attempts to Lebanon in the past 10 months. Both led to massive failure, and all of the forces that tried to invade Lebanon went back to Israel as casualties. In the previous two cases, we heard that it was an elite force from the Golani Brigade, which is not surprising because the Golani Brigade is supposed to be the brigade that is mostly focused on Lebanon. They have previous experience when it comes to Lebanon, and they previously participated in the Lebanese war in 2006 and 82 before that, of course. However, they failed miserably. Now we have another invasion attempt. What does that mean? That means that Israel is escalating. Israel is not taking a step back when it comes to Lebanon. Although they are waiting for a response, they're not reaching a deal. Benjamin Netanyahu is still stubborn when it comes to what's happening with the negotiations. The American administration, they are covering up what's happening, and you're not seeing any progress, right? So that means Israel is looking to push further, right? Push further. Now, they weren't successful this time again. I think they would find it really difficult to find any sort of success when it comes to invading Lebanon. But it clearly shows you how Israel is trying to escalate further. And that was from Muna, and I'm just trying to get further information here. They actually tried to invade Huta, it's called, and Hizbullah targeted them with missiles and mortars, and they forced them to retreat with confirmed hits. This was a report on one Arab media news agency, and that was from Muna Nana. And thank you so much for that. The field guy saying, Mahmoud, did you hear about the Al-Qassam and Quds Martyrdom operation in Tel Aviv? What was the result, and do you think this will drive more Zionists to leave Palestine? Yeah, we heard about that. Apparently, they both confirmed that it was a joint operation. We spoke about it yesterday. And if this is sending any messages, is that the Palestinian resistance is escalating with a diversification of actions against Israel. With regards to more people leaving, well, we've seen that as a trend, and it's still ongoing, with this or without this, primarily because there is no horizon for a solution. That is the main thing. There is no horizon for a solution, and Benjamin Netanyahu is still, insisting on not having anything, despite all of this talk from Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken is going there to give him more time. Again, if he was genuine about his talks about a ceasefire, you wouldn't have had all of this military support and the tens of billions. You're sending them tens of billions. And, what are you going to say to him after you're sending him whatever he needs? Oh, yeah, please have a ceasefire. Well, I have what I need to continue. And again, they are ignoring what Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to normalize. What Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to normalize here is a new status quo, a new reality. What is that new reality? A continuation of the genocide in Gaza under either a full-scale war or a full-scale military operation, or an ongoing targeted military campaign where they go in and out wherever they need to, depending on what's suitable for them. As a matter of fact, we've had Israel already implementing that. So if you recall, during the period where we saw de-escalation and more aid going into Gaza after a supposed threat from Joe Biden and a call with Benjamin Netanyahu, we saw, a period of light military actions from Israel. And what Israel was doing at the time, under the leadership of Netanyahu, is testing how it could go if we, have a light military campaign or a lighter military aggression without deploying all of our divisions, just with a couple of hundreds of troops that are not generally combatants, but are rather there for more policing. So the Netzarim line and a few troops, a couple of dozen, a couple of hundreds in the Philadelphia corridor. And I hope that elaborates. Unknown human, who would insane mind believe these so-called negotiations when history tells us about twisted state of mind, Zionists, and its supporters in the West? Yeah, absolutely. And it's not surprising, but the United States is trying to sell the people the illusion that, there are positive vibes. And again, we don't care about your positive vibes here. We care about what's implemented on the ground. And you're talking, but people are suffering, right? In Gaza, it's a devastating situation. Diseases are spreading, apart from the mass destruction and genocide that's going on. So, but again, they're covering up for it, and they're giving them whatever they need. And NYC Brad, thank you so much for your message, and super much appreciated. And Universal Energy, thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Lisa, Mahmoud, can you also talk about the 800,000 Brooklyn settlers in the West Bank and where they might go or could go or go back to, or possibly at some point, what would that take? Well, that's very interesting, because the squatting establishment that is labeled as the settler establishment in the West Bank is operated from the United States of America. What are we talking about? They constantly tell you two-state solution and this and that. Where do they get the funding from? The United States. They have criminals. You've seen this guy, Yaakov, right? Most of you have seen his video saying, if I won't steal it, someone else will steal it. That's in Sheikh Jarrah. That's the mentality of these people. They take criminal thugs from foreign countries, give them freebies, go there, what you have to do, we'll support you, and terrorize the people. just terrorize the people and live, right? Illegal life. But again, they're used to illegal life, whether in Brooklyn or not in Brooklyn. Where they might go, what could happen? Well, these people are used to impunity, are used to being the people backed and terrorizing civilian population through terror, backed by the state of Israel. Backed by the state of Israel, not by Benjamin Netanyahu or his cabinet, by the state of Israel, okay? Once this support is lifted, what do you think they'll do? Fight? No, you're talking about cowards here. They'll be fleeing. What are we talking about? They're used to fighting innocent people. They're not used to man-to-man, face-to-face fighting. What are we talking about? It was face-to-face. You saw some of these videos where if some of the IDF troops face some of the resistance fighters, they run like cowards. They will flee. What are we talking about? It's not talking about people who, are willing to like sacrifice their lives or whatever for. Even in Gaza, that's why they're suffering tremendously in Gaza, and now begging for more troops. Sylvestra saying some USA war experts suggested that IOF should continue for 2 to 3 months in Gaza, that Hamas will be destroyed in lack of equipment, food, money. Does Hamas have capability to endure under the tunnels? Well, funny enough, today I just came across a very old video of Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson of Al-Qassam brigades, from the beginning of Al-Aqsa flood operation, saying that we are ready for a very long battle. They have clearly proven that they are ready indeed for a very long battle, 10 months into a full-blown genocide and over 80,000 tons of TNT, right? More than 5 times what landed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The size, right, in terms of size of an impact of the bombs, you are talking about a very strong capability. And what we're seeing is a continuation and an escalation. So they are escalating in terms of the resistance movements. They are having more quality attacks on Israel. And they are introducing new weapons to the battlefield. What are we talking about? And I think the people in the United States who are saying that and calling themselves war experts, I think they're nothing but warmongers, not war experts. Warmongers, probably tied to the military-industrial complex, and who wanted this barbarism to continue. And again, probably paid for, without declaration, to say what they're saying. Because if you have failed for the past 10 months, what makes you think that you can achieve what you want to achieve or what you dream of or have the illusion of achieving in 2 to 3 months? This is the same idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is sending, by the way. Mahib, salam Mahmoud, salam brother. Thank you for all your coverage. Welcome. What does the day after for Israel look like? Do the Palestinians have any hope? Well, it seems like everything is moving towards a regional and potentially global war that will be redrawing the maps and rewriting everything. We are not seeing any signs of hope for a ceasefire, firstly, because first and foremost, the first step in having any hope of any solution would be an agreement on a ceasefire, right? However, and let it be very clear, Israel, backed primarily by the United States administration, is pushing for an escalation, and it's not only in Israel. If they were genuine, if they were sincere, if they had any integrity when it comes to a ceasefire in Gaza, they wouldn't have continued to support Israel with all of these weapons and all of this money. Secondly, Ukraine, they're tied now. Everything is tied now. Ukraine went to Kursk, okay, following pressure from the United States. That wasn't a Ukrainian move, to pressurize Russia for their contribution with Iran and what's happening in the Middle East. Now, what are the Russians saying? No ceasefire. Do you know that just several weeks before this invasion into Ukraine, there were talks about a serious ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine? I'm sure many of you haven't heard that. Why? Because they don't want to publish these. There were genuine talks about an all-out ceasefire. There was a bit of a give and take. But again, what's happening is pushed by the war machine, by the United States. They didn't want to give in. Of course, with NATO, that's supposed to be a defense organization, they have proved the contrary in the past 3 decades, and they're pushing for more escalation, right? Pushing for more escalation when the other side is showing actually restraint and sensibility, really. However, when it comes to Israel, look, they're pushing for something bigger, because don't tell me the United States is looking for a ceasefire now. They're not looking for a ceasefire. Yeah, if you're genuine, like I said, you wouldn't be supporting them with these buildings. You wouldn't be supporting them with these weapons. Likewise, in Europe, they're not looking for a deal, and they're using the Zelensky regime as a front against Russia. So clearly, we're not seeing that. So I think the day after, the question is the day after what? So far, we have seen a genocide, we've seen intensity, we have seen escalation, but we haven't seen the full fat view, right? We haven't seen the full picture. And there is room that is very likely to happen for a far bigger escalation, and we're heading closer and closer to it so long as this barbarism continues. Meaning we will have a bigger war for a period, for a certain period. And that certain period will be dictated primarily by the length that each side is willing to go to. So the United States, firstly, they've proven now that they are willing to go to very, very lengthy places, right, to long destinations in prolonging the war, because they have been giving Israel time. They've been buying them time under all sorts of excuses, lies, cover-ups, and supporting them internationally. So you could see a period of an escalated war, potentially a global war, potentially World War III. And do the Palestinian people have any hope? I think, regardless of how bad it is, they probably have the most hope they've ever had now. Why? Because Israel intended for this to be a Nakba, to be a catastrophe, similar to 1948. The only difference is you have people that are not fooled by Israel. That's number one. Secondly, you have people resisting and have prepared for this day. Thirdly, people know the nature of the people that they are facing, and they are being backed. They are being backed by countries, and they are being backed by other resistance movements. So they're not giving up. And what does history show us? History shows us that every nation that continued its resistance for occupation and what is labeled as colonialism, which is in fact mass-scale state terrorism and mass genocides, when they continued to fight, when they continued to call for their rights, eventually they got them. So I don't think the Palestinian case is different than the previous historic events that we have seen. And I think there is a lot of hope. And the only thing that's delaying really a solution here is, first and foremost, the United States administration and their unconditional continued support for a criminal genocidal entity. And that was from Mahib. Thank you so much. Terry, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. And let's go to your next participation. Madeleine, U.S. stopping all American Airlines flights to Israel until April 2025, and many other airlines too, Lufthansa, European Airlines. Some airlines that travel to Israel have breaks in the middle. They don't go directly. So you're talking about very intense measures. People in Israel are complaining, of course, about that. So, what do they know something that we don't know? Maybe they do. Maybe they know something we don't know. And the United States, by its latest actions and the deployment of such intense amounts of forces, massive amounts of forces, prove that we are looking towards escalation. We're looking towards escalation. Now you're seeing that Iran is preparing all of these movements with Russia, with China, with North Korea. Clearly, they're preparing for something big. And clearly, no one from Israel's allies has any sort of leverage on Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, you might as well label him as the acting and actual president of the United States and the head of the armed forces of the United States. The only thing missing is him forcing, American troops to go and fight on behalf of Israel. But hey, we wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Some people in the United States are saying we might have to eventually send people to fight. How successful would they be? That's the question. But there are people who are supporting the idea. Libu, thank you so much. Said Palestine will be free, inshallah. Thank you so much for that. Sylvestra, if Iran accomplishes the attack, okay, but who and how will stop the genocide in Gaza? Well, if Iran attacks and if Hizbullah attacks, you're talking about more involvement on multiple other fronts. That on its own will lift more pressure of Israel's barbarism in Gaza. Why? Because to them, they will have things that are more important. They will have priorities. So let me give you an example. Hizbullah, they started to participate from the beginning. Many people, those sitting there doing nothing, started to blame Hezbollah and, ridicule them. Oh, what are you targeting? You're targeting radars and you're not doing anything. Ignoring the facts on the ground of the immense consequences to a level where Israel said we lost the north. What did that do? That took away over 40% of the IDF's forces. 40%, imagine exhausting all of that and preventing them from going all out, at least in Gaza. And of course, when it comes to Hezbollah, they had their own calculations too, which were first and foremost, after participating firstly in supporting the Palestinian people and trying to lift off the pressure of the genocide in Gaza, not to wage an all-out war that will attract an all-out war in Lebanon. These were the calculations. So that meant that Israel, if they haven't had the Lebanese front, they could have conducted far bigger genocides in Gaza. That's what people need to understand. You see, when you see a devastating situation in front of you, it's sometimes difficult to contextualize, but I think it's important to contextualize, not to feel better about yourself or reduce from the level of catastrophe and devastation that's happening, but to put things in their perspective. For example, the official death toll in Gaza, although the numbers, are most likely higher than that, 40,000 in accordance to the health ministry in Gaza. 40,000, 45,000 is the daily death toll of, for example, Algerians, when France was there. Or if we talk about Vietnam, the United States killed over 1.2 million in the course of 8 years, right? Alongside other examples, many, many examples in history. So that would mean that we will have a further escalation. Israel's priority will be the other fronts. Why? Because, you talk about Iran, what's Gaza in comparison to Iran? What are Gaza's capabilities in terms of Lebanon? By the way, although we've seen all of these things from Hezbollah still haven't used. There's just a little bit from what they have, reports 5% max of their capability. And again, in the long run, that would or could lead to an all-out solution. James, Mahmoud, do you think it'll take the passing of the boomer generation for there to be real change for a better world? Do you think the legacy media will also die with the same generation? You see, the funny thing is, what do you think of my position personally? What do you think of what I say and my views? Okay, think of my views, apart from the fact that I try and give you facts as much as possible, but nevertheless, I will share my views with you. Most of my viewers are, over half of my viewers are over the age of 65. Over 70% are over the age of 55. What does that mean? That means the older generations are listening to what's happening, right? Otherwise, why would they listen to someone like me? They'll go to Sky News and BBC, right? They were used to that. No, there are people from these generations who, many of them were veterans, who opposed previous wars, who opposed Vietnam. I have people who oppose Vietnam listening to me here. So I think this passes the age thing, although there is an argument that, look, things change, but how many people do you know? How many people do you see protesting or taking an active role in informing and enlightening people and sharing the truth that are older people? So that's number one. That's with regards to the age. I think it's a mixed thing, really, because you still have a lot of participation and actions from people who are way older than us and way wiser than us in many cases too. Then, do you think the legacy media will also die with the same generation? Well, I think the legacy media is, dying, definitely. They are trying to keep a level of relevance by having their voices on social media platforms to try and appeal to the younger generations. However, people are more focused on social media and social media platforms to get their news, right? And again, that puts more responsibility on people like myself doing something similar to try and be as accurate as possible and simultaneously sharing your views too. I think the legacy media or mainstream media will try and remain there as much as possible. But I think the urgent actions that should be taken at a political level, not without public pressure, of course, is how really mainstream media operates, who funds mainstream media, how far can they go with their influence and their control, because money controls a lot of things. Money is controlling mainstream media, money is controlling governments, and in many cases you're seeing people in political positions and on what's labeled as legacy or mainstream media acting as nothing but fronts to who, or sales representatives really, to the person who employs them. Why? Because they are telling you the things that their employers want you to hear. And that was from James. Thank you for that. Nasir is saying Algeria waiting for border between Egypt and Gaza to open so they can send their army to help the Palestinians. Well, by that declaration, it's not to go and fight Israel. It's for the army to establish field hospitals. This is the statement that we heard from Algeria. They said that once the borders between Gaza and Egypt are open, their army would be able to establish 3 field hospitals in a matter of 20 days. So, many people read that as, participation or what have you, but I don't think they meant that because they were clear when they said we are able to have field hospitals in Gaza, not actually go and, fight Israel. Wonder World, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Mahmoud, alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Is it true that Egypt is breaking our hearts again by letting Israel control the Rafah border as long as they open it? Well, that doesn't seem to be the case to me from what I understood and from my reading, both from Egyptian sources and international sources too. Why? Because Egypt, of course, they firstly didn't want Israel to invade, let alone have control over the Rafah crossing. But the fact that Egypt is not dealing with Israel with their limited control in the Philadelphia corridor and Rafah crossing clearly proves that they're not going to deal with Israel. What are they willing to deal with? Okay, they are willing to deal with the Palestinian side. Are they willing to deal with the Palestinian side against the will of the Palestinian people? I'm not sure. Why? Because they know how short-lived that would be. Why? Because they have an experience previously. The Palestinian Authority was there. Then we had the elections. Hamas won by a landslide. The PA Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas tried to have certain military coups in coordination with Israel. Hamas took them down. So, to Egypt, from Egypt's perspective, that will still be an unstable situation in Gaza. They don't want an unstable situation in Gaza. They would rather have a balanced and reliable government in Gaza, right? That would have some sort of stability. Egypt does not want instability in that region. So I doubt that Egypt would like Israel to be in the Philadelphia corridor permanently. And as a matter of fact, we've seen from the negotiations that Egypt is applying more pressure on behalf of Hamas during the negotiations for Israel to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. And whenever the issue of the Philadelphia corridor was raised, Egypt told them, at least in the Doha rounds, to our knowledge and from the reports that I've read at the time, Egypt said, Hamas says no Philadelphia corridor. That's it. Dot. Hamas said you should not be on the Philadelphia corridor. Again, that's not coming from Hamas only, Egypt only defending Hamas. That's coming from Egypt defending its national interest. They know that Israel has plans to reoccupy Sinai. What are we talking about? You have ministers in the Israeli government calling to reoccupy Sinai. Israel's maps haven't been submitted to the UN. Why? Because Israel's maps, Israel's borders, end with where the last footsteps of an Israeli soldier. That's the philosophy of David Ben-Gurion, right? So Egypt knows them. Why? Because they've had experience with them. They fought them for years to liberate Sinai. And what else does Egypt know? Egypt also knows that should Israel at any point in the future have control or reoccupy Sinai, that they will have the international backing. Why? Because even after Egypt liberated Sinai, you had voices from Western countries, from the UK and from other parts too, casting doubt on Egypt's claims of sovereignty in Sinai. Why? Because to them, following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they used to say, primarily from a British perspective, but I'm talking to you about the 60s, right? Not now. However, this could be implemented now too. To them, there was no clear evidence that the control over the Sinai Peninsula was for Egypt during the Ottoman Empire. And when the British mandate took over Palestine following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, to them, that was in question. Although Egypt was controlling Gaza at one point. And at one point as well, Egypt was offered to control Gaza. Why? Because Israel, wanted to get rid of the population. Why? To have a Jewish demographic superiority, because they've reached the height of drawing or with having more, attracting more Jewish settlers from all across the world to perform what Israelis call in Hebrew aliyah, or the coming to Israel. Coming up, literally the word means, but it's like the immigration of only Jews. And this is one of the main problems here. They will allow people who are completely foreign or even converted to come to Israel just because they're Jewish, but a Palestinian who can prove to them that they were expelled in 1948 or 67 or any other year, they're not allowed to go back, and they will control their property under what they label as the property of the missing in Israel. So Egypt knows all of that. I don't think they really want Israeli presence. If they were fine with Israeli presence in the Philadelphia corridor, well, they could have dealt with them. They could have dealt with them. Do you know how many offers Israel gave them since the beginning of the war? Israel gave Egypt over 10 offers to amend and update the situation in the Rafah crossing in the Philadelphia corridor. Many offers. One of them, create a new border in your territory. Give us more intel. Dig from your end. Move the Rafah crossing to Karm Abu Salim, or Kerem Shalom in Hebrew, which is in the southeastern part of Gaza, the most southeastern part of Gaza that is interconnected between Israel, Egypt, and Gaza. Why? So that Israel can have more control over what's happening. Egypt refused all of that. Egypt refused all of that because why? Again, because they have that experience with Israel previously. They know Israel is an expansionist entity. They don't want that, regardless of their position or whatever it is when it comes to the genocide. Listen, no one stopped the genocide in Gaza. But they definitely don't want Israeli presence over there. And I don't think they will legitimize Israeli presence or long-term Israeli presence in the Rafah crossing or in the Philadelphia corridor altogether. The virus, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. Unknown human, is this the silence before the big storm? It looks like it. We don't have any signs of hope. I don't think that the United States is applying genuine pressure. I don't think they're sincere in their approach for a ceasefire or during their role as mediators. They have been constantly supporting Israel with whatever they need. And you're not talking about a world, again, that's governed by principles or morals or law. You're talking about a world that is run by power. And they know that, so they will, talk the talk, but support Israel with what they need to continue, which is power, which is military power and money, right? If they lift off that, that's it. Israel's done. What are we talking about? Israel doesn't survive a day without U.S. support, but they are still supporting them. And all the signs, all of the moves, regionally and globally, show that we're headed towards escalation. What are the biggest aircraft carriers doing in the Middle East? What are the nuclear submarines doing in the Middle East? What is this deployment of new F-22s in the Middle East doing? What are all of these Russian, Iranian moves? What are these visits to so many, people in the military industry or defense ministers or Air Force commanders or the top security figure of Russia doing in Iran? What are they all doing? They're all preparing for a very big thing that can explode in any minute. And again, look at what the US administration is doing. It doesn't look like they have anyone sane there operating, right? They're seeing what's happening, and they're continuing the support. Captain Huta, what can Abbas improve by visiting Gaza? Anything other than a Zayo pup? Okay, in relation to Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, the president of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Well, listen, he had this militant almost speech. I won't call it militant, excuse me, I'll take that back. But, you know, a bit of a harsher tone in Turkey, saying, firstly, we operate by the Sharia, Abu Mazen is saying, then it's victory or martyrdom. And I'm going to Gaza even if that costs me my life. What did he do so far? Well, he asked Israel to authorize his trip to Gaza. So he's serious. He wants to go to Gaza. Where do you want to go in Gaza now? What are you going to do? Gaza's destroyed. Are you going to go live in tents with the people to sympathize with them, to show them that you're part of them? Or go back to your mansion in Gaza? That's another thing. Then, what is that going to change in the grand scheme of things? Is it going to change something? Firstly, let's see if Israel authorizes him to go, because, you know, this is supposedly the Palestinian president, but he still needs Israeli approval to go and move and go wherever he wants to go. I don't think they will allow him to. That's number one. Then even if they allow him, what's going to happen? Like, we had a visit from the previous temporary, I think it was prime minister in the West Bank Authority to Gaza in recent years, I don't know, over 10 years ago. We haven't seen a lot of changes after that. And look, I mean, without too much Israeli pressure, I think the Palestinian political groups might be able to, you know, have some sort of an understanding. But again, you know, who failed these understandings and these unification attempts previously? And that's not coming from Hamas, by the way. That's coming from other people who participated on behalf of other organizations. One of them was called Maher al-Tahir, actually, who's from the PFLP in Lebanon. He, when they met in Russia at the time, he said that, you know, the vibes were in the beginning hopeful, but there was an obstacle, which was the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And he elaborated on that at the time, and we spoke about it back then, saying that they did not commit to having a unified front, meaning include armed resistance as part of the path for liberation. And that's something that the Palestinian Authority does not go to. They don't do that. And Abu Mazen, in his speech in Turkey, he said that, you know, we only participate in peaceful resistance. We don't have the capacity to do anything else. Okay, if you want to do that, okay, and allow other people to do that, you be the diplomatic tone or representation, and have some sort of an understanding with the people who choose the other path, that, by the way, is historically proven to be the only path that Israel understands. You see, we didn't have any sort of conceding from Israel historically, apart from when they were met with force, like, you know, Sinai, force, Lebanon, force. They were in Beirut. What are we talking about? Gaza, force. So, you know, if talking worked, cool, amazing, you know. Even Hamas themselves say, you know, we don't really like to fight. We wouldn't really like to fight, but history showed us that we don't get our rights by simply asking. If we only ask, then we continue facing the same problems. And isn't that evident from 30 years of peace negotiations since the Oslo Accords to this day by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank? What have they gained? What lands have they liberated? What settlements did they dismantle? Illegal squatting establishments. What suffering did they lift off the Palestinian people? Israel roams around, does anything that it wants in the West Bank. Birkan Turkmen, Salam Mahmoud, these ceasefire talks were designated for the domestic audience so that they can say Israel accepted but Hamas rejected. So when there is all-out war, they can blame Hamas and Iran. You see, I think it's a mixture of things. Number one, it's Netanyahu having to go to these talks to get the money, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't go. Literally, if he had everything and he had the option not to go, he simply would not negotiate Netanyahu. So that's number one. And to him, that's, well, amazing trade. Okay, you asked me to go and send a delegation. Fine, I'll send a gutted negotiating team without any real powers to reach a deal. They haven't had any powers from the beginning. As a matter of fact, he put a lot of restrictions on them previously. They previously said many times that he constantly puts obstacles and hinders the prospect of a solution. All of the negotiating delegation, by the way, Mossad and Shabak and the IDF. So that's number one. Netanyahu going to negotiate to get the money. Secondly, also to show the Israeli population. But let me tell you something. The Israeli population who want a ceasefire, they are aware of Netanyahu's tricks. You're talking about a population that's been protesting against him for years now. They know his mentality. You're talking about a man that led Israel to 6 elections in 7 years, taking so much resources. He's a psychopath leading the country who only cares about himself. So they wouldn't necessarily buy this notion that Hamas rejected. Why? Because Hamas agreed. And when Hamas agreed, the families of the prisoners in Gaza, the Israelis, were in the streets telling Netanyahu, look, Hamas accepted a ceasefire. Why don't you accept a ceasefire now? Arrington, thank you so much for your super. He said, if a full-scale war erupted between Israel and Hezbollah, would Egypt and Turkey remain uninvolved? In my opinion, Egypt and Turkey will remain uninvolved up until their sovereignty or national integrity, like a direct attack on them, is imposed on them, right? They wouldn't be involved up until then. Why? Because so far, like Egypt used to consider an occupation of the Philadelphia corridor something massive, and we warn Israel and all options are on the table. They're there, but nothing happened. Turkey, they said we're willing to participate militarily a very long time ago. And just a few weeks ago, the Turkish president said that we are able to invade Israel, like we invaded Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. According to him, did they get involved yet? No, they haven't. So, and also they have ties with the NATO too. So I think military participation from Turkey and Egypt would be something out of the question up until the very last minute, where their territories are attacked or they feel like they are under genuine threat, which is again something that I personally find absurd, because I don't see how anyone can see that they are not under threat with such a reckless entity attacking countries regularly. Israel attacks at least 5 countries on a regular basis. And to them, it's under the banner of self-defense, or, having freedom of movement over like Syria and Lebanon and Iran. And again, thank you so much. That was from Arrington. Larry, Mahmoud, the Iran, Hizbullah, Houthi attack, they should be immediately followed with ground invasion by resistance front, so that Israel and co will be busy there and not attacking Iran, isn't it? Well, that's something that we would not be surprised if we see. Why? Because Hezbollah, they already have a plan to invade the Galilee. Secondly, don't forget, in the case of Hezbollah, you have Palestinian refugees lusting to return to their homes. Meaning, well, there are, Hezbollah can invade, and they can call the refugees, please come. It's open. The borders are open. What is Israel going to do then? You're talking about an area, if you're talking about the Galilee, it's already, firstly, empty to a very large extent. According to recent stats by Hezbollah, by the way, over 200,000 fled. Israel officially claims over 80,000 fled. But again, that was from a very long time ago, and Hezbollah expanded their fire range, and they constantly introduced new settlements. Secondly, if we have a case of an invasion to Israel, let's say from the north, okay? Let's not take other areas so far, but let's say the north. Although there could be plans of, escalating things in the West Bank and what have you, and we still haven't spoken about the Golan, and the Syrian defense minister was in Iran not long ago. Not many people spoke about that. What do they prefer for? Something big. Let's talk about the Galilee. If the Palestinian refugees from Lebanon went back to occupied Palestine through the Galilee, well, they could be using the UN resolutions of having, like, I'm returning to Palestine. What are we talking about? Because officially, when you talk about the United Nations, Israel is a massive facade. It's lies based on lies. The partition plan, it does not include many areas of the Galilee. Do you know that? The initial partition plan, it involves areas reaching up to almost Nazareth as being Palestinian territory, or the Arab side of Palestine, even close to Haifa. Meaning, well, they can go, and they would have the international side with them too, okay? And even then, even when you talk about the United Nations now, the United Nations status as this international body supposed to protect people across the world equally, they have their universal human rights and all of this talk, all of these resolutions, even calling for the right of return for the Palestinian refugees, having a Palestinian state, hailing and supporting the Palestinian resistance and intifada, and calling on countries to support it too. These things haven't been implemented, and now their status, the UN status, by the way, is starting to be in question. Why? What's happening now is proving for anyone really that what we have in terms of international law and UN resolutions is nothing but ink on paper. We have talks about the BRICS, and BRICS is expanding, having a separate entity. Now imagine if all of a sudden the BRICS states say, and you're talking about superpowers here, we are withdrawing from the United Nations. We no longer recognize the United Nations. It hasn't protected the people equally. And we are creating establishing a new international body. Because don't forget, the United Nations is a continuation of the League of Nations, again, supported and established by the US. What are we talking about? These World War II formations, we're no longer there. This is a new reality. So that could happen, and we could have ground invasions from other locations too. That's nothing out of the question, nothing imaginary, Secretary General of Hizbullah, he already said, we're going to be, or we will be, having the capacity to be in the Galilee in an all-out war. And if you look at the current battle, it's unlike previous battles. Why? Because Israel's general military strategy was shock strikes, enemy territory, get the job done, mostly by the Air Force, probably some special units, get out, and Israel is usually safe. Now, no, Israel's not safe. People are displaced in Israel. Most of the attacks are being conducted inside of Israeli territory, at least when we talk about Hizbullah, right? People have been displaced in both the north and the south. People fleeing the country, apart from all of the other problems, of course. So everything changed, and all of these things escalate the probability of or increase the probability of potentially having a ground invasion. That's not something like out of the question. And again, that's not something that will be very difficult. It's not like it's going to be mission impossible, right? Israel had to train in some of the settlements in the north, by the way, civilians on protecting the settlements in case of an invasion, something we spoke about a couple of months ago, meaning the army wouldn't be able to protect you. You're going to have to protect yourself if Hizbullah are here. And what are these people going to do with the elite units that are full of hunger to take back their rights, right? With the backing of the Palestinian cause. What are these people going to do to protect their settlements? It's a very likely probability these people will have access through Lebanon, because you have ground routes, you have the sea, and you have the air open in Lebanon, unlike Gaza. And again, even if you look at Gaza, you're talking about they're surviving all of this and still fighting 10 months in, although they are under the siege. They're an enclave. What are we talking about? Embargo enforced on Gaza for all of these years. And Silvestra, thank you so much for your super, and much love back, and greetings to everyone in Croatia. And Dr. X as well, thank you so much. Tam, MahmoodOD from bomb attack in Tel Aviv. Apparently, well, not apparently, Al-Qassam brigades and Sarai al-Quds, the armed wing of Hamas and PIJ, they took responsibility. And they're telling Israel, so long as there's no ceasefire, you will see more surprises. And who does Israel have to blame apart from Netanyahu, really? He had so many opportunities to reach a ceasefire, right? Hamas accepted ceasefire. Well, he's escalating. And the American administration, the US administration, they're acting like, we're calling for a ceasefire, and there are, there's hope, there's positive vibes, throwing sand in the eyes of the people. Kate, can Hamas recapture Philly corridor and Netzarim crossing? Yes, they can. Of course they can. It's not like they can't. Hamas expelled Israel from Gaza, leading to this dismantling of Israeli settlements in Gaza that Israel used to consider, very important settlements. They used to say the fate of these settlements is like the fate of Tel Aviv, but they withdrew. They withdrew when Hamas was far less capable, and Hamas is still capable. So in the long run, it's not in the favor of Israel. It's not in the favor of Israel. The Phil guy, if Israel's border ends at the foot of their last soldier, that makes sense how they have taken over all Western countries. Their soldiers have passports and walk among us. Exactly. Exactly that. Vivet, thank you so much. Is it true Israel killed Al-Dayf? Hagari said so. No. And we just recently had Hamas confirming the opposite. Hamas said that Al-Dayf is alive. Al-Dayf is alive. Janice, thank you as well for this. You said, isn't the occupation of the Philadelphia corridor a violation of the Camp David Accords? Like that matters. If we want to talk about the Camp David Accords, and that's, for those of you who don't know, in reference to the agreement, the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, many things go against the Camp David Accords. Firstly, when Anwar al-Sadat had the agreement of the Camp David Accords, he tied it with the Palestinian cause. He said that during this agreement, there must be a solution for Palestine. We need to have a state, a Palestinian state. Secondly, it included many things, but things that not Israel just breached, but Egypt breached too. In the beginning, I had a video a very long time ago, approximately 10 or 9 months ago, quoting Israeli figures. One of them was a previous senior figure in the Israeli Military Intelligence Directorate, who was leading a unit that used to monitor infrastructure in Arab states, saying that at the time, in his own words, Egypt breached every line or broke every line of the Camp David Accords by what they're doing in Sinai. What are they doing in Sinai? Sinai is supposed to be a demilitarized zone. That's no longer the case. From a very long time ago, Egypt have had forces in Sinai from a very long time ago, and they increased their military presence and heavy equipment in Sinai. And at the time, that report spoke about what Israel labeled as 60 attack tunnels, mass attack tunnels that belong to Egypt in Sinai, meaning they're preparing for a potential Israeli invasion or attack on Sinai, confirming, right, indirectly that Israel does have intentions to take Sinai, and Egypt is preparing for that. So I think the Camp David Accords is really ink on paper, and I think both countries are using it for their own convenience, right? And there are international interests here too, because when you talk about Egypt, you're talking about the Suez Canal, right? International trade. It's not like it's purely Egyptian decision. Well, what's exactly happening? Though really and truly it should be, but there is of course international pressure when it comes to the Suez Canal as well. Jimmy, DNC started the convention today among protests over the war. Kamala is being pressured for weapons embargo and she needs a way out. Possibly a backdoor deal is in the making. US is sneaky. Well, look, again, we judge the things by what we see, not just by what we hear. And although the Biden administration is talking, we have not seen actions. Positive vibes again. What does that? Nothing matters unless we see actions. And the actions are more weapons for Israel, more support for Israel, and US deployment in the Middle East to support Israel. So I don't see Kamala Harris succeeding. And now Trump is saying, you're tiny. Is there any way we can... Is there any way you can expand Israel? He's looking for a new Balfour Declaration. Probably in his head, the Trump Declaration, right? He wants a new, probably Trump Declaration where Israel occupies more parts of the region. I wouldn't be surprised, he's getting hundreds of millions from the lobby. It wouldn't be surprising. And let's see what else we have. Khalid saying, Mahmoud, do you think it's likely that Hamas or Syria will take back the Golan as part of retaliatory actions, as well as attacking from Lebanon? Well, Hamas already attacked from Lebanon. We had actions from Al-Qassam brigades and Sarai al-Quds from Lebanon, alongside other resistance movements in Lebanon. One of them is called سرايا المقاومة السرايا اللبنانية لمقاومة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي, or the Lebanese brigades for the resistance of Israeli occupation, which is an organization trained by Hizbullah but is independent of their ideology. It consists of people with different religious backgrounds, is not tied ideologically with Hezbollah, but they receive training and support from Hezbollah. That's Hezbollah opened that option for people who don't align with them like ideologically. So you have them, you have other groups fighting Israel. So anything to do with the Golan Heights is probable if we're talking about an all-out war. And it's within reach. It's not like it's not within reach. And Golan has been in the circle of back and forth attacks, both from Hezbollah and from Israel. And it's a likely situation. However, the primary attacks that we're talking about from Lebanon, it's going to be primarily from Hizbullah. Ralph, thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. And much love for all of you sending messages. Much love back. Gullyberg and Uncanny Mountain. All of you, and I think that's it. Okay, cool. We'll wrap it up here, guys, then. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. And I will hopefully have another video for you just to elaborate further on the topic that we discussed when it comes to the Iranian actions inside of Israel and the military moves that Israel is making that are signaling that we're looking towards an escalation, despite all of this talk of positivity, which is really and truly lies from what we're seeing. Thank you so much again for joining me. Thank you for all of your participation. And again, I'm sorry if I missed some of your comments, but I appreciate all of your support and contribution. Special thanks to anyone who sent supers. Much appreciated. NYC Bread, Universo Energy, Terry, Libu, The Virus, Arrington, Sylvestra, Dr. X, Vivette, Janice, and Ralph. Thank you so much for that. I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow with another live stream. In the meantime, stay blessed, take care, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.